let's recap on what inherent man is, a term that I use quite a bit. Basically, it's just the inherent base state of a human being, of people, in nature if they were not inhibited or indoctrinated by society. Right? So that's the natural state that you're in. So from an objective perspective, what we would observe here is to hold accountable every instance of being inhibited in the sense of like, from that inherent state, now everything that's restricted that you could possibly do, all your inherent capabilities and freedoms and nature, you would make sure and hold accountable that there's a good reason for every inhibition, instead of what we do in society, which is kind of the opposite. We sort of overcompensate, like we have adequate technology or bread and circuses or whatever, so now we don't question it, so it gets reversed. Instead of asking why are we inhibiting any single thing we can possibly do inherently, we better have a good reason. Instead, we ask the opposite, like, why do you need this freedom? Why do you need that freedom? Why do you need, right? So that's the reversal that we see with overextended government and so forth. And just the way society works in the modern time is like, you need to justify somehow as the individual, or just generally as the public, you have to justify, why do you need this thing? Why do you need the freedom to do this? Why do you need, you have to justify everything you do, right? Instead of, it has to be justified, why can't you do it? Why shouldn't you be able to do it? So in that sense, society is really structured that way, as like guilty until proven innocent. On one hand, we try to glorify people and say, oh, look how good they are, and look, we try to positively glorify. But on the other hand, we treat them in society like they're, we treat them all like they're bad, and we have to, kind of, whatever, always look into everything, always, because, you see, it'd be one thing, like, okay, if you could, laws exist to punish you if you commit a crime, that would be fine. Like, okay, so if somebody actually does something bad, goes out and hurts somebody, now you punish them. But that's not actually how society works. It's in the name of preventing people from doing something bad, it controls everything and overextends everything. So there's always a positive pretense, like, oh, it's in the name of something, the greater good or collective, whatever, safety and stuff. But what it actually does do is it allows you to it allows you to basically overextend every aspect of society. So you got to kind of be consistent with what the conclusion there is. Like, oh, people are good inherently, so therefore we don't need all this inhibition and restriction and overextension, and like being, cameras everywhere watching everything you do, and like, outward insistence. Or people are bad, in which case you shouldn't trust them, and they don't have credibility to have authority and be in those positions to enforce it in the first place, or it's like a total definition. So that's where society is contradictory, and it doesn't surprise you then anything that could happen, anything bad that could happen with it, because on one hand you're pretending. Again, I always have this expression, I'll change it up a bit though, like the premise of society, government, and overextension and authority and all of that is that people are bad and need to be restrained. People are bad, their nature is bad, they can't be trusted, they have to be watched, they have to be controlled, they have to be, restrained. But to that same end, then you empower those same people. You say, okay, in order to enforce this, we're going to empower people, and then we're going to wonder why something goes wrong, because that same nature that we're identifying, is present there too. So you more like pretend, like, oh no, but there's a certain special people certain special kind of people that are immune from that and are above that and are just better. So, right, even though you're kind of acknowledging the same interest, so it's like you have to. This is what I call the contest of contrivance. You almost have to keep up appearances and, you know, who can, you know, like this is the myopic framing and curation that you're controlled by in society, whether it be through the media, whether it be through the, you know, government or, you know, something else, or even your everyday life, you could argue, is defined the same way. The inherent nature and reality could be the same. Like, it's just this lack of awareness. We kind of shut our brains off and react only to what we see with our senses in front of us. It's kind of like, we all know behind closed doors, people probably do blank, whatever it might be, something that would make us uncomfortable. Oh, we know this person probably, you know, whatever, did some, whatever, in the morning they had some fantasy about something and they relieved some other desire they have, and they, you know, like, it's the same fallacy of, like, not being at peace with the naked natural body, where, you know, you basically, you know, everybody has one, you know, everybody has those parts, but yet we obsess over them. It's like, it's not a big deal, right? Everybody has them, so why are we, you know, but we censor it and we act like that's defining just whether, you know, it shows you, like, no imagination. Can't you just imagine the same thing? Don't we, especially in this day and age, have the resource to, like, well, you can find that same thing online with ease, right? Like, anything that you want to see. So, and then it'll be like, oh, that's desensitized and that ruined your marriage because you have to censor reality itself to value your half-mass specified state. But the bigger point is the fact that, again, everything is reduced to the initial basis, but that's just like a myopic curation. So you'll say, that doesn't define it. The nature is the same, right? The tendency is the same. It's just a situation where, right, your awareness of it becomes defining. It's like, who can keep up the best appearance, even though we all know, if we thought about it, that, well, the appearance doesn't matter because everybody has the same tendencies, or generally, like, you know there's things happening behind closed doors that you might question. Right, so the same thing, but again, this is where I say, like, awareness is defining, not reality. So you're basically just being dumb. You're saying, okay, I'm going to take at face value and treat everything as real and meaningful on the initial basis, which means basically your immediate awareness, what's in front of you, what's presented to you, your perception. But if other people are aware of that too, all they have to do is curate it in a certain way. So why would you care about appearances when you know, oh, well, they're only dressing that way or they're only presenting themselves that way because they want to be perceived that way? That doesn't have to have anything to do with what is reality, or more to the point, it's not the totality of their existence. Like, okay, that's what they're presenting, but then you can just see through it and it's pointless because, okay, I'm aware that you're an animal, I'm aware of your naked body, I'm aware of your inherent tendencies and desires that you act out in varying ways. Like, none of that is necessarily bad, but why would you care about the appearance? Because it doesn't change anything or do anything, but it's kind of the basis that requires you just not to think about it. So you treat everything at face value. So if you take everything at face value, then you leave yourself open to be controlled by those who do think about it. Like, you won't think about it, but your life is controlled by people who do think about it, like the larger process of society, right? Like, oh, just don't think too much, or oh, everybody's not out to get you, and just, everything is fine at face value in society. But you don't think that people in positions of power or anything, you don't think that they put a lot of thought into what they're doing, so you're taking it at face value, what has a lot of thought put into it and curation put into it, and it's being presented to you in a certain way to control you, but you take it at face value and therefore are controlled by it. And then the other aspect is the fact that again, so like everybody is aware of something, but we pretend like we're not, and we try to close our eyes and just look, not think and just rely on our very basic awareness in front of us. So that leaves us to be controlled. So the process and the tendency is the same, right? Everybody has the same body parts. Everybody has sexual whatever. So like, imagine if you were just aware of that. In a broader sense, that's how people are controlled. People are controlled like the that's how people are controlled. And what I mean is that you're valuing only what's presented to you, even though you easily can be aware of the nature of the larger process, but you just don't want to think about it. So you pretend something is the case that isn't, because you just block out everything else. So like, it's that selective awareness. Being aware of something makes you responsible for it, like you created it, or it applies to you, right? If you're aware of it, or if you don't overcompensate for it, or if you don't try to hide it or put up appearances, right? Like, you'd be at peace with your natural state, but other people aren't. So then again, it becomes a contest, like, oh, this person just doesn't care about appearances and they're aware of the nature anyway. So again, pretend like that. Oh, they walk around society naked and they're at peace with their naked body and they're not bothering anybody. But people would be bothered by them, not because this is a perfect example of projection. Like, what is observed says more about the observer than what is observed. Where I say that, basically it would bother other people because they're not at peace with themselves. And they're in a contrived state where they're denying reality and denying their own nature and desire, because it's like, you might think, oh, that's a good thing because they're trying to resist their nature, but they're basically pretending that isn't their nature, like that's what they would care about, or they'd be obsessed with it, because if everybody walked around naked, what would be the problem, right? Necessarily, in terms of, being at peace with it. You could say for the sake of children, that could be, obviously bad, but again, you're not attaching a sexual, the body is just a body, so you don't think throughout history and in tribes and stuff like that. It doesn't matter quite the way you think it does, but it's the way that society frames it that makes people, like I say, repression leads to obsession. So, because you're basically living a lie, you have to censor reality, otherwise the truth comes out. So it's not that you are at peace with it or in control of it, it's that you're controlled by it. So, right, you're reacting. It's just a naked body. Everybody has one. It shouldn't be a big deal. But you'll react in shock if you see it, or like in public or whatever, or you're constantly, obsessed and fixated on it, instead of just being at peace with it, like, okay, it's no big deal. Everybody has one, so what's the big deal? The reason why emphasis has to be placed is because you're controlled by it. You aren't allowed to do, engage in sexual things freely. It has to be specified to one person, right? It has to be heavily, rigidly controlled. And even beyond that, like, it doesn't even have to be sexually related, but you just can't be free and at peace with yourself. You have to somehow, again, keep up appearances or so again, it basically tells you that people wouldn't be at peace with something if they saw the truth of it. So it's disingenuous, right? You say, well, people might end up with one person and it's a marriage and soulmate and live happily ever after. That's fine, right? Nobody's telling them not to do it. but the fact that it requires them to censor reality in order to do it shows you it's not only artificial, but it's actively subversive, because again, it's not telling a person what to do, but again, this is the example I always say, is like, in order to specify the stimuli acme and be with one person, right, in a single partner relationship, you can pose that as, okay, that's what somebody wants to do. But if they really wanted to do it, why do they have to not be friends with people of the same gender that they're attracted to and the person they're with? Why do they have to cut that out? Why do they have to, not watch adult films? Why do they have to, cover up and hide from their own natural body in terms of, censoring reality? Why do they have to do all those things? They have to do all those things because their inherent nature or tendency or desire would not be what they're doing. So you have to live a lie in order to maintain that contrived state, right? That's the best way you can say it, because so it's not a question of whether you should or shouldn't do that. You can do that. You can do whatever you want, but that's more so the point, is, do you really want it? And the answer is that if you did, it shouldn't require so many prerequisites, right? This is like the false absolute that's very qualified. Like, oh, you could believe in a religion, but you just have to not think about it and don't question it and be indoctrinated into the church when you're young or whatever. You need all these prerequisites. Yeah, sure, under that circumstance, it might seem to have value, or be valid. So again, think about that stimuli acme specification again. It's not a question of whether you would want it, whether you should do it or not. It's a question of, is it a sound process, or is it what you naturally would want or do? Or again, does it require these prerequisites that would be disqualifying? Because you say, so you wouldn't want to do it, but you pretend you want to do it because whatever, it's easier for society to control. But then you also again, you also have to cut out billions of people. You can't be friends with people of the same gender. So that, again, on one hand, it's being posed as an absolute, like, right, false absolute to specify something, instead of the free, inherent, natural process, which is the stimuli acme, which can be done as much as you want, as little as you want, open relationship, anybody, everybody, kind of, instead of that free, open-ended basis where you'd be in control of it and at peace with the inherent nature, you are taught to deny your inherent nature, hide from it, and then struggle with that artifice. You might say, oh, you're struggling against the inherent nature, but that could be a choice, right? So this is the absolutist way of, doing things. You could do it. This is why the half-mast state is invalid, because if you think, okay, the stimuli acme is, to be practiced freely and fully, then okay, you can engage in orgies and open relationships and stuff like that. And if not, then you would just not do it at all, right? Then just don't have sex at all with anyone ever. But instead, you're reduced to this half-mast state where, oh no, you can do it, but you can only do it in a specific way and in a controlled way and all of that. So you're not at peace with it and choosing. If you want to act like, oh look, that's us struggling against our lustful nature, but it's actually not. It's you being tamed and trained by it like you're an animal, because you're saying you are doing it, but you're only doing it how society tells you, in the way that it tells you, in a reactionary, inconsistent, controlled way. So the cognitive dissonance of that is very strong, because again, if you want to say, oh, you're resisting that inherent nature, then that would just be, you wouldn't have sex at all then, and you would be in control. You would choose that. Or again, you could do it freely, openly, orgies, whatever. But instead, right, you're not at peace with it, and you're not controlling or choosing either of those. You're instead saying, kind of like, you are censoring reality and then acting as though that's the truth. Right, so again, it's absolute, but supposedly, such that you can specify it. But then it requires constant contrivance, constant upholding. It requires, again, you can't be friends with people of the same gender. You can't, you're not at peace with your own naked body, your natural self. You have to hide, you have to censor reality, you have to constantly struggle against it. So it is a lie in the sense that if you were to face the inherent objective reality, it's not about whether it's good or bad by our contrived reactionary standards. That's the whole way we define good and bad. But it's actually the fact that it wouldn't lead to some uniform state of just where everybody mindlessly does the same thing, right? So again, you're being controlled by it, so you should be able to be aware and objective and then decide for yourself. And if that's still what you want, fine, right, to be with the one person or whatever. But instead, it's done in reverse. This is how people are controlled. You have to appeal to their ego. The real reason is, okay, that's society's way of controlling you. It's easier to control. There's a functional basis. You could say the family system, whatever. But it's not approached that way. Instead, it's presented like, oh no, it's love, it's absolute, it's soulmate, it's meant to be. So you feel gratified. But then you see, if you observe the process, you would see, oh, it's not any of those things, because it requires constant contrivance, ritualistic behavior. It requires overcompensation. It suffers from the conflict of contrivance. It allows you to, again, have to censor reality itself, not be at peace with your inherent self. Because you have to deny all these things in order to do it, in order to be controlled, right? So you might think that's a positive, like, well, if it leads to a certain state of people and being in society. But again, that would assume self-control then that you could have without the need for doing that. So you could be aware of it and then choose to do it anyway, right? Like, be aware of the inherent reality and nature and everything, and then you choose to be with one person. That's fine. But that's what it tells you. Oh, if people thought about it objectively and were aware of reality, they wouldn't go along with contrivance. So in other words, it's not valid, but it requires this constant contrivance to uphold it. And again, you appeal to ego gratification, etc. So you see in observable practice how it isn't absolute, at least, right? And then the other aspect is the fact that right, so you have to live that lie in order to be controlled, right? It's really nothing more than that. So, like, if you so it's not something people would naturally do, and not only would they not naturally do it, they would even they would even, again, have to actively censor reality. So they're basically coping with their cognitive dissonance. So they'll often attack other people or behaviors, right, that would indicate freedom, and they have to condemn and censor those things because they're not at peace themselves. So if they were able to, again, they're in an actively controlled, contrived state. So if they were aware of objective reality, they wouldn't do what they're doing. So they have to, again, they basically have to be lied to. They have to lie to themselves. But you might think, oh, it's worth it for the outcome. But nothing should be worth it that way because, again, human beings are thinking creatures. That's what defines us. So nothing should require that. You should be able to think about it fully, objectively, and then decide for yourself. But that's not how it's done, right? Because, again, this curated, controlled state is there. And, again, it's only necessary for a mass collective of people. On an individual basis, it wouldn't matter. You could say, okay, do whatever you want individually, but it's because, oh, there's a mass of people, so we're going to try to control them a certain way. But we can't control them just by saying that we're doing it to control you. You control them by appealing to their gratification and stuff like that. And then from there, you have the ability to again, the fact that you have to lie and deny it and struggle against that. So it really becomes, you become both a slave of it, but also an enforcer of it in that sense. That you would basically say, well, if you see somebody behaving freely or in a variable different sense, you know, they're not telling you what to do, but you would feel the need to tell them what to do and condemn it. Right, you see this with open relationships or anything really. Somebody acting freely, oh, they're crazy, oh, they're bad, we have to condemn that. Right. You have the need to do that, not because there's necessarily anything objectively wrong with what they're doing, but because because of the simple fact that right, you have to condemn freedom. You have to glorify functionless contrivance, like contrivance for contrivance sake, authority for authority's sake, because you're just a controlled, trained animal, right? Like stopping at a red light, even if there's nobody there, right? You just mindlessly do things, even if they don't serve a purpose, even if they're counterproductive. And on the flip side, even if something was free and harmless and positive, you can't do that either, right? So you're doing things that aren't productive. You're doing things that don't serve a purpose just because, or you're not doing things that would be serving a purpose, the same pretense of value which you are controlled by, like, oh, we're controlled for the sake of productivity or this or that. But then if you do that same measure too well or fully, then you would remove the need for contrivance. So you can't do that either, right? So there's that built-in incentive of contrivance, and it's framed as like maybe, oh, selfishness or something. But it's like, so if you do something too well, right, like, oh, if doctors are too good or you make a medicine that cures everything, then, oh, we no longer need them. If the government does its job too well, then we can basically get rid of it, right? So you're prevented from fully doing something because you have to be controlled by it regardless, like even if it doesn't serve a purpose. So, right, if you do something too well, you invalidate contrivance, you remove the need. So contrivance has the incentive to inhibit you that way. Not to inhibit you, oh, because of safety or something, but actually, so it'll be used as like some collective prompt to say, oh no, it's in the collective good, and everything that people do is in their own zero-sum self-interest and is projected that way at the low level, but people don't see that at the high level of government and stuff. But so individually, that'll be projected, but it can't be that you have a measure, you have a base of value that's different. Like, again, being free or again, self-governance or anything like this, that you're removing the need for contrivance, you would not be free to do that. And so it requires you to, again, requires you to censor reality. What was I saying before that? Like, you aren't able to be free or even observe, someone being free. You can't fully practice something either. So again, a contrivance state has an incentive to inhibit you and stop you from fully doing something such that you can invalidate or remove the need for the process altogether. Because again, it's not even a zero-sum thing. Like, it's projected like self-interest or money or whatever. Even people with money, to some degree, still abide by contrivance. Like, it would be something more basic than that. Like, if you could be free, something, that doesn't have to even cost anything or require anything, or rather, that's the whole point, that everything you do would require something, like you need the permission of society, etc., contrivance. Like going out in the woods and living out in the woods and picking berries and stuff, that principle of being able to do that freely, right, would invalidate the entire contrivance state. Okay, you don't need it anymore. You only need it as you're choosing to be a part of it and deferring to it. You only need it as much as you overcompensate or, you desire material things or stuff like that. So basically what you're saying in a half-assed state in society is that basically, you're basically sacrificing your inherent freedom and awareness and thought for, again, nothing more than overcompensation of your inherent needs or tendencies, like reaction relief, like just zero-sum ends, convenience. So you sacrifice freedom and your mind for convenience as zero-sum ends, or again, some sort of hedonistic quality. It's kind of ironic, actually, right? We would say, if you were to not be a part of society and you were to live out in the woods and you're kind of just a minimalist and at peace, you might be called lazy. Like, oh, that's lazy, unproductive, right? But what you're really saying is you're a slave to material things and things that you don't need, right? So is it that they're lazy for being at peace with that, or are you greedy and materialistic and possessive and controlled by things that you don't need? And on the flip side, it would be like, oh, you're doing orgies and you're free. That's somehow hedonistic and bad. But what is the base of your society? It's hedonism anyway. It's the same process. It's like you're just obsessing over one person instead of several. You're just, slaving away for hedonistic pleasures like, fast food or whatever, some certain things like that. So it's the same process at work, but one of them, again, is free. So the real thing of what is condemned, right, is the same process that you're practicing anyway, but free. So freedom is bad. That's basically the point, right? A lot of religions have the same sort of rhetoric. So you're doing the same exact process, but if you do it too much or too well or too fully or too freely or not at all, either of those two things, right, it's negative, but it's the same process. So like, oh, if it's good to, like, oh, like love is good, or you're in a relationship with one person, well then shouldn't it be better if you're doing the same thing with 2 or 5 or 10, and if you can handle it and they're all happy and it's love with all of them, right? So there's no real standard behind it. What you understand is the fact that basically you're in a position to again, it's the same process, but you're just being controlled by it, and then you have to overcompensate for the fact that you're being controlled through gratification, because you can't just acknowledge that, oh, you're just being controlled on a mass scale of the same process in a zero-sum state. So again, it'd be one thing if it was, and like, okay, sex is bad, so just never have it ever with anybody. Okay, fine. Or it's just an inherent process, so just do it freely, fully, however you want. Obviously consent, but like not limiting yourself to one person. But that's really where you can expose a half-mass state, is that it's neither of those. Like, well, if you don't do it at all, then there's no basis to control you by it. Right, so like you're free of that, so how can you control people? How can you tell people what to do, because you can't assume their intent? Like, okay, someone's asexual and they have no interest in sex at all. So now there's a lot of things in society that are assumed and are forced upon you, right, based on some assumption of that. It's like, oh, what should your life goals be? To get married and have kids and why picket fence? But if you have no interest in sex at all, then that doesn't apply to you, so now you can't be controlled by it, or countless other things. So if you don't require or desire it, now you can't be controlled on behalf of it. And then the other aspect of that is the fact that if you were to do it fully, so now you say you can't do it fully, and what that means is that basically you if it's worth doing it, if it's worth valuing, then why not do it all the way, fully, all the time? And what it also shows you is that it's the same process at work. So it's like, oh, it's bad to engage in orgies, but it's okay to have sex with one person. So it's still, the same basic act that's going on. It's just, right, like more is better, more is bad, right? It's something that's valued and glorified, but it's glorified to limit it and control it, right? False absolute to value to specify, often within the nearness postulate, but again, it's the same thing. So sex with one person is good, sex with multiple people is bad. It's the same process at work. So just more of the same is bad. Freedom is bad. And then, right, so if you do it more fully, more freely, it's the same process at work. And again, not doing it at all then is bad too. Because there's like some weird gratification that goes on with it too. It's like, oh, you gotta, like I said, resist. Like, oh, it's you just want to be a hedonist and have orgies and this and that, and it's like, okay, that might be the inherent tendency, and maybe everybody wants to do that. That's why you have to censor reality and hide from the naked body, and whatever, not be at peace with yourself or nature or reality or anything. But so it's more so the means to actually achieve it that are defining, not the desire, the will or the means. So it's not that you or morally gratified, like, oh, look, you're better than something, than doing that. Is that you just lack the will or ability or means to do it, right? Like when people condemn celebrities like that, oh, the celebrity's dating multiple people or something, or they're like a sugar daddy, playboy, whatever. You condemn it, but that's only because, oh, you ultimately would want that too, arguably, or at least the freedom to do that, but you just don't have the option or the money or the whatever that it would take. So you condemn it, but you ultimately want it too, or at least that tendency would apply to you. So this is a way to expose a half-mast state where it's invalid, where you're neither practicing it fully or not at all. So the basis would be like, okay, you engage in orgies and freedom when it comes to that, right? And then it would be condemned, like, oh, that's a bad thing. You're supposed to obsess over the same process, except reduce it to one person instead of being free and arguably not obsessed with it, right, if it's done openly. So you're meant to still do the process, but you're meant to do it halfway, part way. So you do it fully or freely, oh, that's a bad thing. You're supposed to do the same process, but just limit it and control it and feel gratified to overcompensate for the fact that you're being controlled. So then what if the answer is, okay, it's a good thing to resist temptation and to try to, don't do the orgies and all that. Like, right, don't do it too much. So again, good or bad is the definition of measure then. You're doing the same thing, but just to a greater degree, and that makes it bad. So it's not the process itself that's bad. Again, it's basically freedom that's bad. It's doing it too much that's bad, and it's condemned by a collective mass who, again, are trained in like a uniform way, like animals, where on an individual basis they might all want that, but you pretend you don't, and you pretend you're gratified for not having it just because you like the means or opportunity to do it. But the other aspect of this is you kind of use contrivance against itself. Okay, you can't be free and engage in those things fully and completely, even though we're still glorifying things by the same process. It's only in a specified, limited way as an overcompensation for being controlled. But what do you do then? You say, okay, so it was good to resist temptation and to have self-control. Okay, so then let's take it to the next level. Let's not have sex at all ever and have self-control, right? And then remove the need and invalidate the process. Right, but that would be condemned too. So that shows you the control. Like, you can neither do it fully nor not at all. You have to do it halfway, right? That's the question. So that shows you there's no actual standard or value behind it. It's just an artificial basis that allows you to right, it's an artificial basis that allows you to be controlled, and that is the whole purpose of it. There's no actual meaning to it. Because again, the pretense will be used, but not to all the way either, right? So again, you do it fully, that's bad. You don't do it at all, that's bad too, apparently. So right, even on the basis that you would have the pretense, like, oh, look at us resisting temptation, as we're not only are you not resisting it, you're giving into it on the basis of obsessing over one person and being controlled by that, right? You're obsessing over it all the more, whereas orgies and all that would be free and at peace, so you don't have to obsess over it. You just treat the inherent natural process for what it is. And then the other side of it is the simple fact that, right, so the point being that you can expose it by, again, either taking it to an absolute or the minimalism. So again, minimalism would be that you're free of it, you don't require, you don't desire it, so you do less so you're not controlled on behalf of it, right? So it'd be impossible then to tell people what to do based on that, like, that's a life goal, or that's how society is structured, or that, you know, you have to struggle against it, or you have to, like, whatever, have the stress of creating that artificial thing, like a single partner relationship. So all the things associated with it would be out the window. You don't require it, you don't desire it, you require as little as possible, so you can't be controlled on the basis of it. But on the flip side, so either you would not do it at all, in which case you can't be controlled by it, or do it fully such that do it fully such that if you're going to do it, you'll do it fully, freely, and validate the process to a degree that, you know, you're doing it by the same measure, but without restriction. So again, either you don't do it at all and then you're free of any inhibition associated, or you do it fully and freely if you're going to do it at all. So neither of those would include the half-mass state, where you're doing it partially, you're specifying it, you're obsessing over it, struggling with it, overcompensating for it, and then you're you're obsessing over it and just that half-mass state is what I always talk about. Is like nothing would lead to that, right? Rationalization. You would say, oh, if it's worth doing the process, then do it fully, freely, uninhibited. And if it's not worth doing it, then don't do it at all. But there'd be no basis to be controlled by it to say, like, well, we're going to value it, but only partially, and treat it as a false absolute, but in observable practice, it's not.